Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the TakeCast. It's been a while since my good friend Kevin Cole has been on the program. The NFL season begins in about a week. We are going to convene. I've got a couple topics that I want to throw to Kevin. The funniest thing would be if we did quarterback tiers. I don't really have any hot takes on quarterback tiers. I do have a couple takes I want to get off my chest before the start of the season, and also Kevin, I mean, you and I now we are in the streets as solo entrepreneurs. We run our own very fake, very small businesses on the internet, and so we have that in common now. We've not done a show since then. How's the summer treating you, buddy?
It's going good. I mean, honestly, it's a little slow during the summer. So, the NFL is okay at producing storylines that can be rolled into content despite the relative meaninglessness of everything that's happening during June or something like that. And fantasy, so you're in the fantasy streets. We talked about this a little bit. If I ever get back to the fantasy streets, you can also do best ball, although I feel like a lot of that is like more self-indulgent on the analyst part because they just like drafting themselves as opposed to actually being a good ROI investment on that sort of stuff. But now we're getting back into the season. So it's finally, all the takes, all the quarterback takes, as you mentioned, tiers. I'm going to come out with my own quarterback takes, comparing them to Mike Sando's tiers that he has over at The Athletic from NFL Insiders. All of this stuff is finally happening. So I'm ready to start dropping the almost daily content going into the NFL season.
How far down is Kyler Murray in your quarterback tiers?
I don't know. I think he's somewhat similar to where he is on Sandoz, which is in the high meaning bad, I guess, or low. I don't know how you want to phrase it. It's always
Right.
hard
Yeah,
when you
it's
have the
always
rankings.
it is always hard.
So somewhere in that like 15 to 18 sort of range.
Insane. I mean, that is insane. We don't even have enough time. We don't even have enough time. I predict.
Hey, I'm just going purely based upon the numbers. This is all purely based upon numbers. So my stuff, like, I'll even write around the fact that, like, okay, guess what? Brock Purdy maybe isn't like the fourth best quarterback in the NFL. But if you're going to project what he's going to do this season, it's kind of hard not to say that his efficiency isn't good. He's not one of the most likely people to have top 5 efficiency this year.
Sure. Well, so what I kind of wanted to do today was I wanted to predict what we look back on the 2024 season, what the stories of the season might be. I had a couple ideas, and one of them is Kyler Murray fully healthy, fully recovered from the ACL, playing with a real coach, playing with an unbelievably talented wide receiver in Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, probably like the 4th or 5th best receiving tight end in the NFL, 2 good pass catching backs, 2 fairly good complementary wide receivers of Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch. I wonder if the Arizona Cardinals winning that division, winning the NFC West, and being, a 2 seed or something. Because remember, the NFC, it's the 49ers.
For those watching, you can see me from my furrowed brow about winning the NFC West with the 49ers in there. But go ahead.
Well, this would be the second part of that story would be right now it's August 28th. Brandon Ayuk has not reported to training camp. Trent Williams has not reported to training camp. The on and off splits with Trent Williams in his entire career have been massive. And I would guess, this is my supposition, and we could do the McShanny stuff because I think that's another thing that you and I like to spar about. I'm going to guess that the McShanny stuff is a bit harder to work when Juwan Jennings, 24-year-old Ricky Pearsall, and Jacob Cowing are your rotational wide receivers and not Brandon Ayuk. So that is my first potential story of the season is a 12-win Arizona Cardinals season and a more middling, difficult San Francisco 49ers season.
Yeah, I mean, I can see the 49ers thing to a bit, but I do think they're pretty stacked. I mean, in fact, I was having a discussion with mutual friend Josh Hermsmeyer on my Unexpected Points pod. Let me plug that right there. Yesterday about the CeeDee Lamb contract, and in contrasting it to Brandon Ayuk and what's going on there, I think you can argue that the Cowboys did nothing since drafting CeeDee Lamb to bolster their wide receiver room. Even though CeeDee Lamb was seen as somewhat of a luxury pick at the time, someone who fell to them because they had Amari Cooper and they had, I guess, Michael Gallup. Remember that? He was breakout. Never quite happened there.
He had a 1,000-yard season. Michael Gallup
Okay,
had
well,
a
maybe it was
1,000-yard
the next
season.
year. The next year, people were drafting him in like the 4th round or something.
Yes.
So they haven't done anything. I think they drafted Tolbert right in the 3rd round, and then other than that, it's like a 5th round pick, a 6th round pick. Whereas the 49ers, like credibly, they can say, okay, guess what? Maybe our rotational receiver is not ideal, although they tend to get decent numbers out of some of those guys. But we have Christian McCaffrey, we have George Kittle, we have Deebo Samuel. We have some other places we can go with the ball. And the one thing that they can point to is maybe also downplaying the value of Ayuk, correctly or not, would be that Brock Purdy was pretty good in limited time, in half a season as a rookie, where Ayuk hadn't really broken out like he did last year. And Jimmy Garoppolo was pretty good for multiple seasons there, where Ayuk was a player who showed potential but never really broke out either. So they might look at that and say, you know what, this guy is not like the key to the offense. He's someone that we can maybe replace around a little bit more. I think they have more options than some other teams when it comes to a number one receiver not being in the fold. And splits. You want to talk about splits, okay? So Williams, maybe I get that, but I think you can't ignore the age. I think you can't ignore the fact that he's 36 years old. So I get who he was in the past, right? But we're talking about who someone is in the future when it comes to what they're going to do. And splits can be, you have to like look at the split. You can get a little bit more information from that, but you also have to think, okay, what's reasonable is what the differences have made. I mean, I remember, I think it was Teron Armstead, I want to say, going into last year, everyone was like, oh my God, look at the Tua on-off splits with Teron Armstead. And he wasn't there, I guess it was week 1 or something. And Tua had like totally, completely crushed when he was out. So like sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't. I think Trent Williams has also been a more effective run blocker, low key, than he's been a pass blocker the last couple of years, at least relative to his pass blocking. So again, it's something where matters.
Well,
but
that's kind of a Shanahan thing. I would assume.
Yeah.
I would assume that is similar to how he gets 8.1 YPA out of every quarterback in the NFL. Is that there's some Shanahan magic. I'm like where he sets it up so that run blockers have a good. What would be the right way to say this? Like the way Shanahan sets up the offense, everyone's job is kind of easy. And I would assume that is true. I mean, not that blocking anyone at the NFL level is easy, but I would assume he sets things up in such a way that like you get good PFF grades from the way that Shanahan runs his offense or whatever, if you're the run blocking tackle.
Yeah, I mean, I scheme, you can, I don't know anything when it comes to scheme things. But one thing that I kind of know is that they used to say it was the Shanahan offense was like a hack on everything, right? It's like, oh, you can get the discount quarterback, you can get the discount, maybe not wide receiver, since Andre Johnson and some others have done well in the past there, but you can get the discount running back, right? Famously, for all those sort of things.
Sure.
And another thing is you could get discounted offensive linemen when it came to the run game because of the fact that you put them on the move so often that they don't have to be like a one-on-one dominant, push your guy 5 yards down the field type, which kind of seems like that's who Trent Williams is. But anyway, he can also figure out how to maximize the top end talent, it seems like, throughout his career when it comes to Julio Jones and that Matt Ryan pairing, when it comes to what Trent Williams has done, when it comes to what Christian McCaffrey has been able to do. So I just think there's not a simplistic way of looking at it. But again, maybe the replacement level, though, is a little bit higher, especially we're talking about, again, a 36-year-old. We don't know whether or not the cliff is going to come sometime soon for him. So that's why I think that the 49ers are pretty content to stay put. And if you look at their odds when it comes to Super Bowl, I mean, they're like the best team in the NFL, according to the numbers, pretty substantially, maybe not as substantially.
Yeah, my skin in the game answer is that I would fade that. I would take a stab on some NFC team. I don't know if it would be the Eagles. I think the Eagles are better positioned than the market believes. I think the market is sort of poisoned by that sample we got at the end of last year where Jalen Hurts was playing with the injured knee. And I mean, Kevin, you're definitely going to push back against this, but the vibes just could not have been any worse. That game against the Buccaneers, they were just going in so beat up. They just basically gotten their asses handed to them for like 6 weeks straight. Vibes could not have been any worse. I wonder if Kellen Moore kind of unfairly scapegoated for the Chargers stuff. The offense was mostly fine. We are like 18 months removed from Kellen Moore being a hot name for being a head coach. Everyone loved Kellen Moore. He leaves Dallas. The offense is fine, not great. Also had a ton of injuries. Mike Williams and Keenan Allen both miss. I kind of wonder if Kellen Moore is as good as he was in Dallas and just like totally revamps the way that Jalen Hurts plays, because it just was not working last year. The back half of last year, Jalen Hurts was as bad. It was as bad as he was as a rookie, honestly. As a passer, it was really bad.
I mean, I don't have it in front of me, unfortunately, but there, I think there's a bit of a misperception for what happened with. Let me see if I can even find it. What happened with Hurts and the Eagles' offense, or what happened to the Eagles, I guess, generally at
Yeah.
the end of last year, because their offense, yeah, it struggled a bit, and it struggled a bit.
But it was never going to be just with those players and with how efficient they are in short yardage. It's just hard for them to be that bad. Like a huge part of bad offenses is that they can never convert on third down. And if Jalen Hurts is your quarterback, you are just going to do pretty well on third and fourth downs. It's like anything he kind of adds as a down the field passer on those downs is extra. I actually do. It's kind of crazy.
Okay, well,
for me
let me just get my point in real quick, which was if you actually look at the efficiency of the offense, it didn't change that much first
that
half to
much.
second half of the season. It did change. The perception changed a ton because they were winning games they shouldn't have been winning in the first half of the year. Remember, they started really hot. The tush push was working a little bit too much. Everyone's going to say, oh, Jason Kelsey's gone, so the tush push doesn't work. Well, they were kind of outperforming, like in any reasonable expectation from what would happen on that. But the reality was the defense just completely cliff dived. For what in the second half of the season. Oh, here we go. I have some numbers here. So here's my numbers that I put together. So Eagles offensive EPA per play, they were 9th the first 11 weeks of the season, weeks 12 through 17. I guess maybe this is before week 18 happened, or it probably didn't matter. They were actually 7th, so actually slightly better, but the defense went from 18th to 30th on how bad they were. But that's what happens with the perception game with a lot of these quarterbacks and offenses is you win. QB wins like really colors, I think, the perception. And if it doesn't look good, if it doesn't look good, especially at the end of games, then there's a bit of a coloring the perception. So I'm high-ish on the Eagles because I think the offense is just like still pretty good. Hurts was an MVP candidate a couple of years ago. I don't think anything's changed that effectively there. And you just hope that the defense is chaos year over year, and they'll just be better because it's unlikely you'll be that bad for 2 straight years and not have the depth that they had going into last year.
So that is, I think I agree with you holistically. I'm looking at the NFC. I guess we are looking at it in a fundamentally different way. I'm saying I think the market is probably wrong, or not wrong about the 49ers, but is not building in some of the downside risk, right? Some of like, well, what happens if Brandon Ayuk missing is a big deal? What happens if I guess I can't say. I don't know who the backup tackle is for the 49ers. Maybe they have a really good swing tackle and the ball knowers are saying, what
Well, then I would fade. I would fade whatever the ball knowers are saying. Yeah, well, one thing on Kellen Moore is this might be offensive coordinator. It might be my biggest pet peeve when it comes to ball knowers.
Oh no.
And what they're saying about it, because okay, let's face it, people get mad at us nerds. Maybe me nerd, maybe not you as much, because you're trying to hybrid. You get some ball knowing in there every now and again.
I like ball. I like to watch. I guess I should say I don't always know what I'm watching, but I do like to watch. Like I do like to watch the All 22 and this new NFL Pro thing just to kind of see what's going on.
Yeah, well, some of these other guys know a little bit more about what they're watching, but they have like no clue as to whether or not it's like predictive or anything else going forward, including like coaches and everything too, right? We see bad moves all the time. The tape lies constantly. But anyway, when it comes to Kellen Moore, what happens with offensive coordinators is, and this is when you have your film hipsters out there who have exploded onto the scene via social media, is I find very often what happens. So Kellen Moore is a great example. So Kellen Moore was like, his peak as far as sentiment was concerned was probably like 3 or 4 years ago or something like that, like be a full year prior to him going to San Diego, right? But then the film hipsters got really high on Dak Prescott. After, remember, Dak Prescott was like, "Oh, should we even re-sign him or not?" At the first, then he had a
It
good
was
few
2021. The Cowboys led the NFL in points and yards.
Yeah, so then the film hipsters got super high on Dak and Kellen Moore, and then when Dak wasn't playing maybe quite as well 2 years ago, this is what happens with the film hipsters: is if they really love a quarterback, and they love Justin Herbert too, right? If they really love a quarterback, then it's like, who's to blame for things not going well? Offensive coordinator, he's calling the wrong plays. Like, pretty simple: call the plays that work, do the scheme. That scheme didn't work, so therefore you're doing the wrong scheme. Like, that's what most of it amounts to when it comes to like the analysis on these things. And the thing that annoys me is, like, as a nerd, when I'm saying coaches are doing something wrong on fourth down, well, I mean, I've studied it and thought about it a lot more than a coach has. These guys are like telling offensive coordinators who like haven't seen their children in the last 10
like
years, because
yeah,
this is all they think
they
about.
don't even know their children.
Yeah, this is all they think about, and they're telling them that they know better, than the offensive coordinator, like how to do their core responsibility as an offensive coordinator. So Kellen Moore, I'm sure he's fine. That's my example. He's been hired. People like him. I'm sure he is fine. I can't think too deeply about how he'll affect things or not. I just think the Eagles have good offensive players, so that they still have good offensive players. So that I like that.
They have good offensive players. They have a quarterback that I'm higher on relative to the market, particularly as a passer. Their division should be quite weak. The Giants should be pretty bad. My hopes for the Commanders are mixed. I don't know if I love the Jaden Daniels, Cliff Kingsbury marriage after watching what Cliff did to my beautiful boy, Kyler.
But did you watch the second start in the preseason? The ball, I think the time to throw was 2.1 seconds or something like that. Like, I mean, he was throwing darts. Don't get me wrong. Like, he was throwing darts that were actually pretty accurate. I mean, I think McLaurin got like a 17 yards of yak on their longest play on a 3-yard out because it was so well placed. But at the same time, I mean, bro, this is looking ugly. This is looking like what he was doing to Kyler when he first got there in Arizona too, that people were complaining about. There'll be lots of Cliff Kingsbury bitching this season. I can guarantee that. I don't even need. I can make that prediction right off the bat.
And I will be one of them. I will definitely.
They're playing fast, although they were playing fast. So at least that's something.
I will. I'll do a prediction on who we're gonna bitch about the most. Shane Waldron coaching Caleb Williams. You want to talk about a guy that Twitter is gonna be like, this guy's ruining Caleb Williams. He's calling all the wrong plays. He's playing too much Gerald Everett. They're running the ball too much. They're limiting Caleb Williams. They're not letting him be himself. I predict that by week 5, we'll have seen one incredible Caleb Williams game, like a 380-yard, 3-touchdown game where he does like some insane wizardry. But they also will have had a game where he's thrown 3 interceptions, and people are going to be like, if Rome Odunze would run more routes instead of Gerald Everett, this team would be winning games. And there'll be, I don't know. It's like, what was the thing that McCarthy, that they would always be mad? It would be like he loved this one route concept so much and he would run it too often. There will be something like that with Waldron. We'll be like, it's too predictable. I predict Twitter will fire Shane Waldron 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, I think it was like for McCarthy, it was like the West Coast slant, flat slant on one side, and they would just spam that over and over again. Okay, here's my Bears take. I think there's probably a little bit too much optimism, not in the betting markets as much as in like some fan/media markets, because their defense was awesome to end the last year. Again, that's why there was even this faint, like, should we keep Justin Fields? Again, it was like the flip side of the Eagles thing, where somehow Justin Fields is like, well, he's learning how to win. It's like, well, yeah, you learn how to win when your defense doesn't give up any points and you only need to score once or twice. That's how you learn how to. I mean, that's mostly media nonsense. And obviously, like, the Bears knew for a very long time that Fields was going to hit the streets, right? And nobody else really wanted him. So I think we can kind of get a grip there. But right. The Bears, like, they had a good defense last year. It's probably going to regress. I mean, in the second half of last year, it's probably going to regress a little bit somewhat. So they'll be okay. Offensively, they actually have like good surroundings for him. But the problem is, for a quarterback, like, Sure, even if you get a CJ Stroud sort of season, which is awesome. I mean, that's like the high end of outcomes, or a Justin Herbert type of season from a number of years ago. You still don't want that. Still wouldn't be like the ceiling for the type of player. I mean, we're hoping for more from Stroud this year. Herbert gave us even more in his second year than he gave us in his first year. So I do think there's maybe a little bit more of a limited ceiling with the rookie quarterback in Chicago, because if he plays like a top 12 quarterback, that's an awesome year for a rookie quarterback, as opposed to, in a second year guy could be a top 5 quarterback if he really emerges like Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes
That's
did.
that would
So
be my personal prediction, is that we see, I mean, actually very similar to Stroud. I mean, people forget Stroud literally lost a game to Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers last year. Like there were some growing pains.
well, they
There are
got
going to be
destroyed by the Ravens also early. I think maybe it was week 1 to start the season. But yeah, so people kind of just forgot about that too.
yes, and they were not particularly competitive in the playoff game either. The first one they were incredible, and then the second one
Yeah,
they
the
were
first
way
one was
behind.
like 5 plays. They just scored, just like threw it down
Yes.
the field. The Browns defense just like, go ahead. There's the end zone. Make what you will.
I wonder if that is potentially one of the stories of the season, is basically Slowick fixes some of his Shanahan tendencies where he wants to run on first down all the time. I think Warren Sharp had some data on this, that basically all of Slowick's tendencies mirrored the Shanahan tendencies on like first down and third downs and things. And I wonder if they fix some of that stuff, and the addition of Diggs. Like I guess this is more of a fantasy football take, but definitely would impact real football if Stroud throws for like 5,300 yards and 51 touchdowns. Like basically just goes full nuclear, breaks every record, wins MVP. I mean, that they have such a weak division that could easily be the 1 seed. I am not personally betting on this. I'm more open to it than I was 3 months ago. I actually kind of started the offseason in a fashion you would respect, as kind of a curmudgeon on the Texans, being like, they run too much, and CJ Stroud, like the ranges of outcomes are so wide. He's not Mahomes yet. But I am kind of starting to buy in that this is possible.
I mean, it's possible. I thought it was interesting that his odds for leading the NFL in passing yards, at least as of the last time I checked, because I had very boring, like I'm not even paying attention to the betting stuff that much. I had a very boring take on a podcast where they asked me for one prediction. I was looking through some stuff and I was like, Patrick Mahomes is only slightly favored, very slightly favored over CJ Stroud to lead the NFL in passing yards. And I was like, that sounds good to me. Because I think he still had a lot of passing attempts last year. He still had a ton of passing attempts. It's just his YPA was down. So I mean, we'll see with Stroud. I mean, you're going to have more volume, probably. So maintaining that efficiency is probably pretty tough. So I mean, I think it could be pretty good this year. Maybe I'm not as high on him as some others, just because the range of outcomes goes all the way to MVP. But then again, a reasonable take is that if he performs as well as he did last year, that's probably still a pretty good like second year for a quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, if he finishes third in MVP voting, giant win for the Houston Texans, right? Just as an organization, probably means they win a bunch of games. While we are on the AFC South and we are on ball knowing, it's year 4 for Trevor Lawrence. The ball knowers continue to tell us time and time again, we don't understand how good Trevor Lawrence is. Calvin Ridley can't catch. None of these guys can catch. None of these guys can get open. Lawrence actually places the ball perfectly all the time. He's a great player. We don't get it. Does it happen? I mean, they did get Brian Thomas Jr. Gabe Davis, I think, is like a classic better for real football than fantasy football player, where, Gabe Davis is like final form of the sacrificial X wide receiver that a lot of these West Coast offenses use. Like Andy Reid has always had one of these guys. Shanahan before Ayuk has often had one of these guys, sort of his Chris Conley is the guy who is like the backup for that role right now for them. But now instead of a sacrificial X wide receiver, they have a guy who can kind of earn targets in Gabe Davis. So they have a pretty solid 11 personnel. What do we think? No more excuses for Trevor Lawrence?
What's interesting, okay, this is talk about ball knowers, which I always think it's interesting. This is another like pet peeve of mine when it comes to the film hipsters. on Twitter. It's like, you guys are the ball knowers, yet you're telling the NFL that they're wrong about a lot of different stuff. So, like, don't they know
I mean,
ball too? Like,
it's
aren't they
not
ball
it's
knowers? Like, what the
like
when it comes to Trevor Lawrence, let me tell you, Trevor Lawrence, why I bring that up is that
yeah.
according to these Mike Sando at the Athletic, everyone should check out his QB tiers. The ball knowers within the NFL, at least, have capitulated. We have capitulation on Trevor Lawrence. He was ranked 8th last year, going into last year. Three people saw him as a tier 1 quarterback. 33 of the, I guess we're going 50, thought he was a tier 2 quarterback. Some still had him in tier 3. This year, the capitulation set in. He's down to 16th. 0 say tier 1 versus 3. 18 say tier 2, where it was 33. So a huge drop there. And everyone else threw him in tier 3. So, like, we have the film hipsters telling us that he's like a tier 1 guy. We have the NFL telling us that he's a tier 3 guy. So that's interesting to me, is that they've capitulated on him. I have like an in-between take, as I always do when it comes to these things.
Yes. I would say maybe my evolution, Kevin, is maybe I actually am more of a ball knower than I let on.
I mean, it's more fun. It's more fun, definitely.
It's way more fun. What I would think is like the comparison in my head is that Lawrence has already signed his contract, correct? He already signed the extension, or is that incorrect? So
no,
I'm
thinking,
thinking,
let's just sitting at this table for the last 3 months or whatever it was. Yeah.
Let's see. I'm gonna pull up his SPO track, because
I mean, everyone reported the deal, so yeah.
Yeah, $275 million full contract extension. Okay, so the next big contract, now that Tua has signed his deal, do you know who the next big contract to be signed at the quarterback position in the NFL is?
What's coming after this? Well, I mean, Dak is supposed to be next, right?
Dak doesn't count. I refuse to engage in Dak contract discourse on this podcast. Dak is a perfectly cromulent quarterback. You can absolutely win a Super Bowl with him. The Cowboys will never win a Super Bowl with him because they're just kind of incompetent. But
okay, I don't even know what cromulent means, but so I'm gonna have
yes,
to pull
you
up
do. You don't
for that one. It sounds like
you
some
don't watch
like,
The Simpsons, Kevin?
no, I actually don't watch The Simpsons. I was gonna say it sounds like some Superman shit or something. Like, is that kryptonite and cromulent?
No, it's from
Okay,
it's from
you
The
talking about
Simpsons,
next big
but
contract, like who could get signed next offseason, like Brock Purdy or something? I mean,
that's what I'm gonna say. I'm saying, dude, the Brock Purdy contract discourse might actually be the end of NFL Twitter as we know it. Fantasy football Twitter,
I don't know. I don't know about
NFL
that.
Twitter.
I think if the 49ers are good again this year and he's like in the top 3 of efficiency again, I think we're going to get capitulation for the haters. The haters and the losers, of which there are
No,
many,
I
are going to
they're
capitulate
literally
on Brock Purdy.
I'll say this right now, and everyone listening to this, clip it, play this back to me in a year. There is nothing that Brock Purdy could do for me. They could go 19-0, or I guess 20-0 now. They could go 20-0. Purdy could win MVP. They could beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl 50-0. And I still don't think I'm giving Brock Purdy $275 million if I'm the San Francisco. And I know it's like the Tua deal really sets the precedent that absolutely no team is ever going to let their average to slightly above average quarterback test the market. It'll just never happen. Maybe in like
Yeah, I was gonna say, if
2047.
Tua gets his check, I mean, I could give you Tua maybe on that one. But Purdy's been that much better. I mean, he didn't have a great Super Bowl, don't get me wrong, but they were a punt going off of someone's Achilles away from winning the Super Bowl last year. So here's what I'll say when it comes to Purdy, and something that was edifying for me is when I did this. This was my series that I did during the off season last year. I'm trying to see if I have all of my rankings somewhere where I can find, where I did this QB GOAT series where I tried to like quantify career value for guys over time. And you have to look at some of these guys and you say to yourself, okay, like if we were going to rank them after a couple of years into their career, if the film hipsters were going to watch them and dissect whether or not they can make a particular off-platform throw or this, that. I mean, the game's changed. Don't get me wrong. The game's changed, right? But still, some of these guys you're going to look at and you're like, they never would have been loved by the film hipsters. Do you think Joe Montana would have been a guy that film hipsters really loved? No. Do you think Drew Brees would have been a guy
wait.
that film
No,
hipsters
Drew
really
Drew
loved?
Brees.
No.
Drew Brees. No. I need to.
Joe Montana?
I'm
I don't
not.
think Joe
I'm
Montana
not old
would.
enough. I never watched Joe Montana play a game. He was retired like literally before I was born.
I know, but
But
I'm a
Brees,
boomer, so I'll tell you.
let me
No. The answer is no.
let me tell you why the film watchers would have liked Brees. They would have liked Brees for the same reason they liked Russell Wilson, which is that ball knowers can kind of see what it was that made Brees special, because it's like you put a ball knower out there. Brees beat you with his brain. Brees beat you with angles.
Yes, I think it's just
He beat you with
capitulation
being
over time.
smarter.
Like he just did way too much. He did way too much, and there was just overwhelming evidence over so many years that was just too much to handle. But let me go through some more of this for you. Dan Fouts. Trust me, ball knowers would have hated this guy. Of course, he did have a system change. Coriel came in there and turned everything around. But lots of production from him. No titles though, of course. Lots of production from him. Let me look at who else in here. Fran Tarkenton. They might have liked him. I see some Tarkenton actually in Brock Purdy's game. These other guys who are near the top. No, most of these other guys. People
That's
liked.
a thing. The Fran Tarkenton Brock Purdy thing is a thing.
I didn't know. Is that a thing? I didn't know that was, but I could see it a little bit.
Yeah.
So the difference is like Tarkenton later in his career was like volume through the roof. That's why he was passing the ball constantly, and obviously they haven't been doing that with Purdy. So that's like the downside. That's the signal for the Brock Purdy isn't that good. As you look at, I was looking at MVP stuff. Like there's basically no MVP who doesn't pass it above expectation based upon down distance and all that sort of game situation, game states. Other than I think Cam Newton was questionable MVP that he had in the past. So even Lamar Jackson in his second season was passing it above expectation. They were just stomping. They were just curb stomping everyone during the regular season. So the expectation was very low there. So Brock Purdy's still like pretty far below expectation. And again, let's face it, I don't care how good your running game and defense is. If you put like Mahomes or Peyton Manning or someone in that offense, they're going to be throwing above expectation.
Sure.
So that's the downside of Brock Purdy. But my larger point is you can win with these guys. So it's going to be hard not to.
Of course you can. The 49ers almost won the Super Bowl like 6 months ago with Purdy. Like
I know, but I'm saying Drew Brees could be a can-win guy. But again, the volume was there. So that's what we're going to have to see for Purdy. We're going to have to see the Purdy.
I was there with my own eyes. You can't trick me on Drew Brees. Drew Brees was really, really good. He was really, really good. He was way better.
He didn't start his career that hot, but okay.
No,
he literally was what they like. I mean, this team drafted Phillip Rivers and told him to hit the bricks. But yeah,
it's a big lesson to learn. Which I think my personal lesson for this is analyzing the elevator doors of what would have happened if Mahomes did not end up with Andy Reid. And there are definitely some cases where Mahomes' career turns out not Bortlesy because he's so insanely talented, but not this, right? Not this perfect marriage of system and coach and pass catchers.
9 out of 10 times, if he is drafted by Andy Reid and we shake the simulation glass, his career doesn't turn out this good. His results don't turn out this good. So yeah, definitely.
So anyway, I want to circle all the way back around to it'll never happen. But I really would.
You'll never capitulate on Brock Purdy. We're saying that now.
I never want to say never because maybe he will just play so obviously incredible that I'll have no choice to. But if we just run back Brock Purdy his whole career and the 49ers, we shake the snow globe and they win the Super Bowl this upcoming year and the experience looks and feels the same, I will not capitulate.
Okay, well, yeah, he still has 0 tier 1 votes so the NFL insiders have moved him up somewhat, but they're not capitulating there. But then he's still ranked a lot higher than Tua, who doesn't have any.
I would take Purdy over Tua right now for 2 reasons. First one being very sneaky thing about Purdy. He is a thick boy. He is built kind of like a fullback. I mean, obviously he's not that big. Yes.
THICC.
Yeah, and I like that in a quarterback. I like a guy to be able to get sacked and then tap the defender on the helmet and be like, "Good hit, brother." Like I like that. Whereas when Tua gets hit, you're like, "Is that the last time we ever saw Tua get hit?" He's skinny now. Tyreek was joking about him being on Ozempic. I don't know if I love the skinny Tua experience. I also
think a lot of people take Purdy before Tua. Other than, I mean,
I take
without
Purdy.
Mike McDaniel, they're advocating for him. I'm not even sure, he gets the contract. I do think it's a little bit of an outlier to look at Tua and say this means a whole lot for guys that people don't believe in getting contracts. But I mean, like, the 49ers are probably gonna be good this year. So how do you deal with a guy who's been really good for 3 straight years? I don't know. I guess you could push him out and wait another year if you want to sign him, but seems like that's probably not going to happen. And the Ayuk stuff, doesn't that hint a little bit at the fact that they're going to give Purdy the bag, I guess, or
He's getting the bag, buddy.
okay.
He the bag. There's
So
absolutely
you'll be sitting
no
back as
question.
they rack up Super Bowl appearances and just
And
saying, "I
I'll
still don't
have my
like it.
arms crossed and I'll say it doesn't count. It doesn't count.
I still don't like it. I still don't
It
like it."
doesn't count because Nick Mullins had an 8.1 YPA with the same team. It doesn't count.
Yeah, you won't. I mean, you won't be alone. That's for sure. I don't think there is enough. Like, I don't think there is enough shamelessness for anyone to like the anti-Purdy crew to flip over to being pro Purdy without it coming out a little bit too much. I mean, Steve Ruiz
Okay,
says
let
that he would
me.
quit football analysis if they won the Super Bowl, and they were like one play away from
They
doing
were
that.
one
So
play away. They were a McCole Hardman boneheaded drop away. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine if Hardman would have dropped that pass and the
I mean, he
49ers
does
go on
something
to win?
boneheaded. There was one play last year where they had it like 1st and goal at the 2, and they did some like McCole Hardman option something. I'm like, what the hell? You fumbled it. I don't remember when it happened. I was like, this is so much like, why would you give it to the most boneheaded player on your team in this sort of situation? But anyway, Hardman's gone now. Tony's gone too. That's one of the few times I've actually sat out there because I don't like to get too confident about anything where I'm like, where I was just, I do not, this guy's not good. Now everyone's gonna say, oh, he had a punt return in the Super Bowl, so he's good, I guess, or whatever. But
I mean,
at least I got that one.
you know that I bet Kadarius Toney 100-1 to win Super Bowl MVP, and if that punt return just goes into the end zone instead of the 4-yard line, he just wins Super Bowl MVP.
Yeah, probably.
Those are the two worst beats of my life were Damian Williams not winning Super Bowl MVP and Kadarius Toney not winning Super Bowl MVP. Just two very, very bad beats involving my favorite
Somehow the
football
Chiefs
team.
keep chugging on even without those guys. So yeah.
Some it is true. So the other thing I for sure wanted to get to was I thought this would be a good argument for us is I feel like the KOC Darnold thing isn't this gonna
Oh
be
God,
such a
you're
good.
not Sam Hive. You're not Darnold Hive, are you?
Well, let's get into it. Let's get into it. What I think is that this is a fantastic case study. This is like a scientific experiment of what happens when you put this. I mean, I guess Darnold is if you had to allocate him one way or the other, he's a ball knower guy. You could log on Twitter right now and find someone to defend the entire body of Sam Darnold's work right now.
Well, when you have like a top 5 worst start to your career statistically, yeah, I think it's pretty hard to. It's pretty hard. Even the ball no, you have to be a ball knower guy, or else you're just not. Or else you don't exist.
I mean, there's been flashes with Darnold at
There's
the NFL
always
level.
flashes. That was my whole okay. You know the Anthony Richardson discourse that was happening last week. I don't think
Yes.
people realize when who was it? Herb Street. When Herb Street says, "What if he's inconsistent this year?" That's a euphemism for bad. Okay,
Bad.
That's what they say about Zach Wilson after his rookie year. Be like, "Oh, he was inconsistent." It's like, no, he stunk. Like everyone has flashes. But anyway, go ahead. So flashes always happen.
So it's basically sort of what's happened with the Shanahan tree offense, right? So I would include KOC in that. Obviously, Shanahan himself, McVay, McDaniel. There's another guy. Who am I forgetting? There's one more.
It's like the entire NFL at this point.
Yeah. No, there's 11 teams that have and it doesn't matter. Anyways, it's mostly been the opposite of Darnold, guys. It's been lower drafted guys who don't have like cannon arms, were not, didn't go to USC, didn't go to Bama, didn't go to wherever, that have succeeded. Although Tua went to Bama, which is sort of funny. But Darnold is the reclamation project. Like, could two players who play the same position be more stylistically different than Mullins and Darnold, or not stylistically, but pedigree, right? So Mullins was, I want to say, Southern Mississippi off the top of my head. That might be wrong. Was a UDFA, maybe a day 3 pick. Doesn't matter. And Darnold,
I think it was a UDFA. I think it was. I remember one of my enraged moments was there was a puff piece written about Mullins when he was doing well. Back in the day, where it was like, oh, they knew Shanahan knew this guy was going to be good. And I was like, dude, he's a UDFA, and you guys cut him and then re-signed him later. Like, you literally said, go ahead, someone else can have him, and then they bring him back. But anyway, sorry, that's another rant for another time.
So Darnold being the KOC guy, and they gave him $10 million, which is pretty rich for a backup quarterback contract. Josh McCown was the backup quarterback to Darnold his rookie year for the Jets. They're very close friends, reportedly. McCown is the quarterback's coach, which is obviously why they brought him
seems
in.
to be the most beloved person on the planet.
In the whole NFL,
coach with no coaching experience. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, he's like the most beloved guy in the NFL. So I kind of think it's going to go well. I think he's going to throw more interceptions than KOC wants, which is kind of the Darnold downfall. But I kind of think they might be a little feisty on offense. Like they could Darnold could throw for 4,100 yards, I think, for this Minnesota team. I don't know what that teaches us. I don't know what we learn, but it will be with the offense I'm probably watching like the closest the first month of the season.
I mean, you are kind of right when it comes to, I know I kind of shit on the flashes thing a bit, but you are right that like what Darnold gives is a little bit more sustained flash a few different times, but it's been unpredictable when it's going to happen. I mean, it was at the end of his first year, people were like, oh, he was pretty good to end this season. And then he stunk to begin his second year. And then he was pretty good at the end of his second year. People are like, oh, maybe he's going to be pretty good. And then it just didn't happen. In Carolina, I believe he started pretty well when he first started there, and then he was
the quarterback 1 in fantasy for the first month of the season when he was a Carolina Panther. True story.
Yeah, and then when he came in relief in his last year in Carolina, he was like pretty good to end the season until he just shit the bed in his last week and threw like 3 interceptions. So the thing with him has always been, and you'd say if you can get him to stop doing ridiculously dumb things and turning over the ball, then he would be pretty decent.
His INT rate is 3.1% for his career.
Then he would be pretty decent. But the problem is, I think he's just, and this is actually the guy I comped him to coming out of college. I remember there was like a Tony Romo comp for him. And I'm like, first of all, I don't like UDFAs versus guys who are going to be thought of as being the number 1 overall pick at the time. Right. Before Baker came out of nowhere. Like I comped him with Jameis. I think he's just got a lot of Jameis in his game. Like there's some good stuff that happens there, and then it goes god awful wrong. So like, can he reform at this point in his career? I don't think so. I mean, I've seen guys reform to not taking sacks after several years of getting beaten up. I don't know if you see guys who are this far into their career, no matter how young they are. I know Darnold's a young guy. Reform that out of their game. So I think that's always going to be the problem for him. And it's partially caused by the fact that he does make some throws sometimes where you're like, that looks really good, but he doesn't have that strong of an arm. Like he does this wind up thing and he tries to make plays. He tries to, he's cutting checks that his arm can't cash sometimes. And will he stop doing that? Maybe. I don't know. Like he has just enough athleticism,
do you know ball?
Just enough arm talent.
Does Kevin know ball?
Well,
I'm worried. I'm vaguely worried after you just said that you might know ball.
Well, have you seen it? Like he has just enough escapability to think that he can always escape. And he has just good enough of an arm, and he can throw off platform, but it's not strong enough to think that he can make the throw. And the combination of those two things has led to disastrous results so far. Will he ever refine that? I mean, maybe he could. Maybe KOC can get him to just play like Kirk Cousins, and if he does so, it could be decent. I just at this point I would bet that he can't be reformed though, and that's going to be the downside. So it's very possible 3 weeks into the season, the Vikings are like 2-1. Darnold's playing well, and everyone is like victory lapping themselves, breaking their arm, patting themselves on the back.
You
Darnold
you
hide,
just
and then
know
he
you
just
just
blows
know
it for like the next 5 weeks straight.
I sort of think like, man, he's gonna play just well enough to get like a pretty good contract. Like some poor team is gonna pay him. And we have recent precedent for this because it like literally number 1 overall pick, Baker Mayfield, where Baker has always been better than Darnold, but
People like
I mean,
Darnold. People would be more excited about Darnold. I mean, Darnold, okay, I think in that draft, if let's say every single quarterback was wiped out before the draft and you had the same front offices in there, I think like high 20s, maybe 30 front offices take Darnold over Baker in that draft. So I think Darnold like has more love. I mean, he got traded for a pretty decent amount despite doing nothing for the Jets. So yeah. Ball knowers love Darnold. He gets him hot and bothered with his clips and his tape more so than what Baker does, I think.
Yes. I mean Sam Darnold is just kind of like fancy or non-fancy. He's all the Trevor Lawrence, right? Where it's never really been his fault. It was Adam Gase's fault. It was the New York
Man,
Jets'
you're really
fault.
coming for Trevor Lawrence. So let me give Trevor Lawrence one thing, and I didn't mention this before, just really quickly when it comes to Lawrence. A little context, maybe it helps or not. According to my like adjusted EPA numbers, which it's mostly because of drops for Lawrence, but it's also because of bad fumble recovery luck, which is fairly random. And I also separate between those which the quarterback recovers himself versus those which random people recover, which is less likely, obviously. Like Trevor Lawrence has gotten big boosts in that metric the last 2 years. So I know it looks bad and the results have been bad. And he makes some poor decisions sometimes and things like that. But he has gotten big boosts in those. So he could be a little bit like low-key underrated versus the results, at least.
Sure.
Whereas Darnold stinks. Darnold's just
I
bad.
think
Bad,
I
bad,
think
bad.
I think I know enough ball to be convinced that Trevor Lawrence could be a tier 1 quarterback. It's maybe lurking in there somewhere for him. It's not been on display yet, but I think I'm woke enough to ball that I could say that I could see it. I definitely can't say that I can see it. I could see Darnold being the 17th best quarterback in the NFL. That would be great. That'd be
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I mean, the problem with the ball
huge win.
knowers, I mean, the hipster guys is they're putting Trevor Lawrence in like the top 10, I mean, top 5, top 6, top 7. Like, come on, guys. We can't do that. I'm sorry. Like, you can't just completely wipe out everything that's happened. But if you want to say he has a chance to get there, sure, I'm with you.
Sure. Okay. I had one other thing that I wanted to do, and now I'm forgetting it. There was a quarterback that we had talked about on Twitter. Oh, the Buffalo Bills. That is kind of how I want to wrap it up. The Buffalo Bills, very interesting case study in managing your team. They kind of go all in last year in terms of how they allocated their contracts, and the 2024 Bills are sort of running back the 2023 Chiefs without the defense. I mean, who is their highest
It's a
paid wide
worse
receiver? I guess.
version. It's a much worse version. The Chiefs were better at just saying we're not gonna go all in year over year. Now the Bills were basically forced to do this because they did go too far all in the last 2 years.
Yes, and I'm wondering. I mean, it would be a great year for Josh Allen to win MVP because it would be him throwing to fucking Valdez. I mean, it's funny that MVS is playing a role on both of these teams. But like Curtis Samuel is kind of like Joe Brady's pet guy. I really did not like the Keon Coleman pick, although stylistically, it sounded like. I mean, they traded the Xavier Worthy pick. You want to talk about psychic damage? Trading the Kansas City Chiefs, the Mahomes pick, and then the Worthy pick. I don't care how irrational fan base this is. I just would not have done it. I would have just taken Keon Coleman there and said, I don't, whatever excess value I'm gaining from this trade is not worth the psychic damage of giving the Chiefs who they want.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that was the sentiment at the time. Yeah.
And it should be the sentiment now. The sentiment should not have changed. But anyway,
Coleman's though, he's funny. He's a
he's
comedian.
very funny. I want to go the other way. I think people listening to this are expecting me to just tear into them and be like, LOL Bills. I actually wonder if this could be Allen's MVP year, because voters are going to know what we know, which is that the defense kind of stinks. Matt Milano, who I'm not sure has ever played a football game, supposedly their best defensive player, not already injured. I think he tore his bicep tendon or something. The wide receiver room is really bad. It could be, I mean, this could be Josh Allen's like 19 rushing touchdown season. This could be his Lamar last year, where Lamar, I would not say Lamar's skill position players were particularly good last year. And I don't think, I don't know.
his numbers weren't particularly good either.
I was going to say, like, but
his defense was really good.
Not to relitigate this, but Lamar would have had better total counting stats and everything had the defense been worse. Like, he was playing at a high enough. I don't begrudge Lamar his MVP. I don't know if I would have voted for him, but we don't need to relitigate that. Anyways, Bills 2024. Say your piece.
Okay, so here's the thing. I think there are two things that we have trouble putting together, and like there's a little bit of a Josh Allen like a maternal instinct that's kicking in for a lot of people who are like trying to protect him against, like, for instance, the QB tiers thing. He actually went down slightly. He's below Joe Burrow in the QB tiers thing. So people are very enraged about that. Who are like hipster / stats people. Both people can be kind of, because Josh Allen was much better than his numbers last year. And people point to the INTs, where the reality is he was actually throwing a lot of like arm punts and other things that didn't really matter that much. And he was accumulating a lot of value in other places, all those sorts of things. So I think we can look at that and we can say, you know, he's like an underrated guy by a lot of people who are not thinking deeply about how good he has been. And he's like clearly the second best quarterback in the NFL, in my opinion. Like, he's put himself in that a tier below Mahomes, don't get me wrong, but like at the top of the next tier, if you want to put a next tier of quarterbacks, despite the fact that Lamar Jackson MVP and all this stuff, I'm still putting Josh Allen there. But just because we believe those things, it doesn't mean we have to get like rose-colored glasses as we're looking at this Bills team this season, which is not looking good. Okay, like, this offense is not looking good. This defense is not looking good. Like, a quarterback can only do so much. So I think an MVP actually has a better chance of happening, and this is maybe evidenced by the fact that like Jalen Hurts was kind of in the MVP conversation a couple of years ago. I think it's better for an MVP if you have a ton of talent around you and you put up the best numbers in the league and people look at you and say you're an elite quarterback like they would Josh Allen. Like, I'd rather have all those things than to be like sledding uphill, because traditionally it's like the guy who has the best efficiency and numbers in the league is the MVP.
Most wins, the MVP. And EPA.
And you're not Brock Purdy. So like, don't be Brock Purdy, because no one believes in you, and have the best numbers in the league. So I think everything that's happening with the Bills this year makes that more difficult for Josh Allen. The defense is not good. Like, they're not going to win games like Lamar Jackson's defense won a lot of games for him in the first half of the year last year. So I actually think I might like kind of fade Josh Allen on MVP and fade the Bills generally, but not because I don't believe in Josh Allen. Like, I still believe Josh Allen is like potentially underrated and a great quarterback and the second best quarterback in the league. But I think some things could go wrong this year just because of the surroundings.
I find it, I mean, I feel a little bit bad for Josh. I think everyone should probably feel a little bit bad for Josh. He just, you know, the 14 seconds game or 13 seconds game, not his fault. They were Khalil. I can't get this play out of my head. This is very in the weeds, but you're not playing a ton of fantasy football this year. Khalil Shakir is like kind of like a hot sleeper. And I can't get out of my head that Khalil Shakir quit on the ball in the biggest play of the game against the Chiefs, that 3rd and long, where Allen got pushed off his spot and Shakir kind of quit on the play. It's just like, I don't know. I feel kind of bad for Josh.
No, I think there's lots of reasons to feel bad for Josh Allen. I mean, like I'm saying, since I guess it was 2020, he had his breakout, right? Like, he's been so good. Okay, he's got nothing to show for it. I think he's got a second team All Pro, I believe, below Aaron Rodgers in one of those years. So he has a second team All Pro, but that's it. No first team All Pros, no MVPs. Lamar Jackson's got 2 MVPs, and he's better. I mean, he's better than Lamar Jackson. Okay, and no Super Bowl appearances. Has he made it to the championship game in the AFC? I don't even know. Yeah. Did he make it 1 year in the championship game? Because when they lost to the Chiefs in the 13-second game, then it was the Bengals that the Chiefs lost to in the championship game,
Yes,
right?
they in 20
One?
in 2020 they lost to the 38-24 game.
Oh, yeah,
The
yeah. So they
was the
lose in
conference
a game where
championship.
Mahomes just goes nuclear in that game, right? Um,
Yes.
and it's been a while, right? And like Josh Allen's gotten better in some ways since. I mean, 2020 was his breakout year, but he's gotten better since then. So he has all this. He's had to deal with Stephon Diggs for the last however many years and just like not say anything. He does have guys making bonehead plays over there, and he's pretty cool. Like he seems like a cool guy. He doesn't get on anyone's case. He's not taking that much money from the team. He signed a 6-year extension. He's not taking them. He's in Buffalo for God's sake, even though he loves Southern California. I know he's a big Orange County guy. Shout out to San Clemente. I was down there. They said Josh Allen loves to come down there during the offseason. So I do feel bad for him because I think he's been so good and kind of like not diva-ish at all and just plowing through whatever happens to go wrong. But we'll see what happens this season because I think things could get a little rough for him.
I think so. I guess if we're going through the whole, we've hit on all the AFC talking points. We hit on Purdy. It's not a football talk show if we don't go to Joey B to Joey Burrow in Cincinnati. You have any big thoughts on Jamar Chase holdout, T Higgins franchise, new offensive coordinator, anything there? I think my opinion is Josh Allen is actually underrated, and that if it was not for the existence of Patrick Mahomes, he would be the clear biggest star, the best. I actually feel Burrow is a little overrated. Maybe a little bit of bias there, but that's what I feel.
Yeah, I don't know. It depends on who you're talking about. I mean, he's probably one of the biggest divergences when it comes to these NFL insiders who seems to have given him a pass on last year and still have him ranked very highly with the QB tiers. But the QB tiers there's a bias in the formula because when they say tier 1, it explicitly says in like passing, you have to be able to pass your way out of every single situation. So I think people look at like Josh Allen and somehow, oh, he runs a lot. So maybe, he needs that a little bit more than a guy who can't run. It's like, I'd rather have a guy who's like good at passing and can run versus can't do one versus the other. So I think there's elements to both, but some people seem to be pretty down on him. He was been severely overrated before this offseason. Every single year going into the year, people were like, oh, is he better than Patrick Mahomes? Because they had because they had good team results in the playoffs, right? And they actually beat Mahomes and they actually went to the Super Bowl in a year where their defense played pretty well. I mean, his numbers are vastly trailing someone like Josh Allen. So yeah, I think he's probably still on the overrated side, but people are a lot further down on him when it comes to MVP odds and things like that going into this year than they had been the last couple of years. So it's starting to approach, some sense of normalcy. We're not quite there yet, though.
And it could totally go the other way this year. This could be his laying waste. This could be his MVP season, 4,700 yards, 32 touchdowns, runs a little bit. He's definitely more mobile.
I mean,
than
I would bet against it, I guess.
I also would bet against it because of the sacks. The sacks are an issue with him.
Yeah, and I mean, they were making a lot of huge plays with Jamar Chase in that rookie year, and it's never really returned. He did reform his game a little bit to take fewer sacks a couple of years ago, and he kind of flipped that switch. But I just don't know if it's sustainable if he's that type of guy who can really sustain that level of play. Kind of what Mahomesian was able, Mahomes was able to really turn that dial and say, okay, we'll get rid of the explosives and we'll still be super efficient and be MVP a couple of years ago. I just don't know if he can quite do that. And I just think in an NFL with Patrick Mahomes, with Josh Allen, with Lamar Jackson, with a bunch of other guys who, CJ Stroud coming up now, Justin Herbert, maybe he'll play better this year. Aaron Rodgers, maybe he'll have a miracle season and come back. I don't know. Jalen Hurts, who's going to have you got a lot of guys who could potentially win MVP. So I think that also makes it difficult for anyone who's not like Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, who isn't going to be, who you can't just slot in as like a top 3 quarterback every year.
Yeah, I'm just fair. I think this is going to be an awesome season. I'm hoping my hope is that the new kickoff rule is an indication that they're going to officiate receivers and the passing game even lighter because they just want scoring to go up. It's kind of like how the NBA did the opposite, where the NBA shadow changed the rules in the middle of the season last year to make scoring harder. that is my hope for this season. I
You know,
have
you're talking
very,
about
very high
prediction.
hopes.
You're talking about predictions, and I was just kind of like researching. I was just thinking in my head a little bit. So here's my prediction for like a trend or a discovery or something, a shift, a vibe shift that'll happen after this year. Is my prediction for vibe shift is that people are going to be like, okay, we kind of got a little crazy with all these wide receiver contracts over the last
Oh,
few years. You
oh,
know, like
interesting, interesting.
it's gone through the roof. Like Justin Jefferson is going to be playing with some trash at quarterback. We'll see what his numbers are going to be. You know, CeeDee Lamb is like, you know, he's fine. He's great. He'll still do well, but we'll see there. AJ Brown, you know, he's been okay, but he's not getting targeted really enough to really have a huge outlier season. Amon-Ross St. Brown, I mean, come on, give me a break. Why is this guy even making that much money? Tyreek Hill, is there a wall for Tyreek Hill eventually? Devontae Adams has kind of already hit that wall. Cooper Kupp is already going down the tubes. We're giving a bunch of money to Nico Collins. I don't know. I feel like the buzz, and there was a little bit of buzz about this because the Chiefs won without any wide receivers last year, but that buzz quickly faded. I think there might be a little bit more buzz
Yeah, I think it
of
quickly faded
let's
about the
not pay
time
these
Calvin
guys.
Ridley got $96 million after accomplishing absolutely nothing in his NFL career.
So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying people are finally going to look at it and say, this is the position whose contracts have inflated the most. Well, maybe along with quarterback, but you know,
It's because passing is more important than ever. Every team wants 3, not just 2. And the high end guys do really separate themselves from the second. Like I would just like you talking about like T. Higgins is going to get crazy money. Like whatever Amon-Ra St. Brown is getting paid, I would double that versus what T. Higgins is getting paid.
well, I think what also is happening is we've loosened up. Like there's more liquidity in the NFL markets. Like guys are getting traded. Like AJ Brown, for instance, right? Like does that happen if we're talking about 10 years ago? No, like you remember before it was if wide receivers switch teams in fantasy, it's death. But that was because they were like free agents who their teams decided they didn't want to re-sign. Now we're getting guys who are being traded. So I think that has really boosted the wide receiver market is we have this thing where teams with a rookie contract quarterback are willing to trade away their future picks and give a enormous contract to these guys. Think about it. You know, Devontae Adams, well, it's not rookie contract, but still Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, all these guys are getting traded, Stephon Diggs, and getting big contracts in different places where that just wasn't happening before. So I think some people may step back now and be like, you know what? I don't know if I want to give up draft picks and a ton of money to go sign this 25-year-old receiver that other people were doing over the last several years. And maybe it's a bit more risky than we thought.
Yeah, I'm gonna predict it goes the other way. I'm actually gonna predict
the
it
other
goes
way.
the other way.
The receiver contracts are going up like 10%
And
a year.
I'm gonna say like Jalen Tolbert is gonna have like an okay year for the Cowboys and get like Christian Kirk money. I think it.
Well, free agency is a different thing. I agree. Free agency, they're always being overpaid. I'm talking more of the
trades,
like elite, what they're paying these elite guys right now in contracts.
Sure. All right. Let's get out of here. Let's end the program.
The 49ers are still good without Brandon Ayuk being great too. That'll be another point of evidence in my favor. So yeah.
That's a Windhorse meme right there. What came first, the Shanahan or the Purdy? What came first? Yeah. I really hope I don't have to capitulate on Brock Purdy, but I will. If I need to remain Bayesian on Brock Purdy, I will.
The thing is, he's kind of fun to watch. Like he moves around, you know, he does things sometimes, you know. I don't think he's
I just can't to me, they're all Nick Mullins. Jimmy Garoppolo, you're Nick Mullins. Brock Purdy, you're Nick Mullins. CJ Beathard, you're Nick Mullins. Sam Darnold.
See, the Nick Mullins thing, like the guy was good for a stretch, and then everyone put the stamp down that Shanahan quarterbacks are always great.
What do you think?
He was bad. Then he was bad the next time. And CJ Beathard was just like bad when he played too.
What do you think Nick Mullins' career YPA is off the top of your head? I'll tell you.
I don't even know what an average YPA is. So 7.5. I know
7.1. Nick Mullins has thrown 803 career passes. He started 20 games. He's 5-15. What do you believe his YPA is?
I don't know. If it's 7.71, then I'll say 6.9 or something like that.
It's 8 flat.
But he was good for Minnesota, though, right? He was good when he played in YPA. Even beyond
stat that is technically true, but is a lie. Nick Mullins' career YPA is better than Patrick Mahomes' career YPA.
Yeah, well, he turns the ball over too much. That's what it
Yeah,
comes to. People may
if you do
forget that
adjusted yards per attempt.
before Jimmy Garoppolo got there in I guess it's 2017, the 49ers hadn't won a game that season, and then he won the last 5 games of the season. So it's not like it always goes well for Shanahan. No matter what with the quarterbacks.
Yeah. All right, let's get out of here. Tell the people about Unexpected Points, and we can be on our merry way.
Yeah, Substack, Unexpected Points podcast comes out a couple times a week. Got Hermsmeyer on there for those who defense doesn't matter. Josh Hermsmeyer, who likes to enrage everyone with all of his takes there on once a week. And then for the content during the season, we're gonna have as a royal we, it's just me. Updated.
You got it when you were a solo entrepreneur, though. You always have to say we for whatever reason.
Yeah, you have to. It makes it sound like there's some operation here when it's just me and my in my hoodie typing on a keyboard. So like updated rankings for quarterbacks based upon this like evidence-based kind of Bayesian updating that I do every week. These adjusted quarterback efficiency numbers, which take out the high variance elements and fumble recoveries and other sort of stuff. And then specifically all the different games, I give you like a wrap up on all the different games where I have these scores, like what the score would have been based upon more fundamental play in these types of games. So it has all those numbers and quarterback numbers and fourth down decision commentary. So that's for every single game. I put out a post on normally the early window on Sunday, and then the late window, Sunday night football, Monday night football, Thursday night football, all the different games. So it's kind of gives you a better idea of what you think you saw, but you're not quite sure what you saw, specifically when it comes to like a lot of third down conversions, which may happen, a lot of fumble recovery luck. There can be a lot of things that move one way or another. And somehow they enrage fans in both directions. Like if your team wins and I say they should have lost, obviously, like people get upset about that. But sometimes even when teams lose and I say they should have won, they're like, oh, thanks. We're going to hang our banner of adjusted scores banner. So it allows people to get enraged on both sides. So that's a good thing.
That's the brand. I mean, that's the reverse of ball knowing. That's being a fucking nerd is just making people is on both sides as mad as possible.
Yeah, if you're like, well, actually, then people you're coming for you,
for sure,
are coming for you immediately. But sorry, you guys are so allergic to like knowledge. All right.
Yeah, there we go. All right, everyone, check out Unexpected Points. Make sure that you are subscribed to this channel and to the Davis Mattek YouTube channel. And I will be back next week.